in Europe?
Not to this extent, no. There isn't as much Zionist money in the European political system as much as there is Zionist money and media muscle in the United States. In the United States, Zionist organizations can punish American politicians if they don't do what they're supposed to do. Not the same thing in Europe. You find many dissenting voices, many MPs in Britain, in France, that oppose Israel openly. It's inconceivable in the United States. It got to a situation where one of the activists who were shot on the flotilla, he was shot 4 times in the head and once in the chest. And none of our politicians want to push the Israelis to give us justifications. Why did you shoot a US citizen like that? And it's at close range too. And they're not pushing it. In the New York Times, it was fascinating, the New York Times story that reported the story, the headline simply said, a US citizen among the dead. But if you read the story, in paragraph 6, the New York Times buries the information that the gentleman was shot 4 times in the head at close range. Now, this is the extent to which even the New York Times bent to cover up for our beloved Israel in the United States.
Why does the media treat Israelis like their ex-girlfriend or something? I mean, it's like we always regret. Even invasion of another country, destroying a whole city in Beirut, is just regret. And when a simple violation by a misbehaving Arab is a terrorist.
I mean, can you imagine if Iran did this, if Iran assaulted the humanitarian aid convoy like this, what the reaction would be in the United States?
Well, you brought Iran. So how this all of a sudden became, from the Israelis' perspective, defending themselves from the Iranians' threat? How this is coming from Turks mostly and Greece, and coming from Greece, Cyprus,
and Ireland, and Britain. And
so how did Iran
and
come into this? This is how they justify their act. They are just try to protect themselves from the Iranian threats.
I mean, Israel can say we're protecting ourselves from supernatural green humans, and the U.S. media will just run with it. Whatever Israel PR machine says, the mainstream U.S. media just takes it and runs with it. I mean, it doesn't mean there aren't honest, hard-working reporters in the United States. There are. But on the main, the people who control editorial rooms, who control editorial policy, they are on the main in Israel's pocket. And this is, I think, the central problem of our country here in the United States. We have an incestuous relationship with Israel. And as long as we keep following Israel, it will lead us to our doom. It will lead us to unsafety, to war, to destruction, and to continuous strife. And I think we need to do something about it. We want the United States back. We want our country back.
Why not a lot of Americans feel the same way you do?
I think many do. It's becoming more and more vocalized. People are more and more saying questioning it. No two countries in history or ever in history will ever have identical interests. Whatever Israel does, we support it regardless.
Israel is 6 million people. It's a very small country. And America is a very the only superpower we have. How can those two have an, kind of parity in a relationship and their interest?
Well, it's the presence of pro-Israeli groups in the American political system. Pro-Israeli groups have a very strong influence in the American political system, in the election of governors, in the election of representatives, in the election of senators, in the White House, in the various state departments, in the Defense Department, in the industry. They have a very strong grip on the way politics is done in the United States. Many journalists joke behind the scenes that the Palestinians will get their freedom when the Americans get theirs. So the day we get our freedom from Israel here in America, the Palestinians maybe will get their freedom too.
Has anything changed since Obama's pledge to do something and try to reach out to the Muslim world? I want to see this. He's standing in Cairo making this speech to the Muslim world, and he's been in eloquent and people cheering, and he says "Salaam alaikum" and all that crap.
I don't want to be completely cynical and say nothing has changed. Yeah. Some things have changed. For the first time in U.S.-Israeli history, the U.S. military is complaining about the U.S.-Israeli relationship. The U.S. military told the White House that essentially the threat to U.S. soldiers in Afghanistan, in Iraq, in Somalia, around the world, is direct consequence of what the Israelis do. Israeli actions are putting American soldiers in danger and are putting us here, Americans here in America, in danger. So because it's coming from the military, Obama had to do something about it, and the Israelis were told 2 months ago, they were told, look, what you're doing here, construction of settlements illegally against international law, the blockade of Gaza, the destruction of Palestinian farmland, all of this creates resentment in the Islamic world, which creates recruitment for Al-Qaeda, for insurgents. It creates anti-American feeling, and it comes back to haunt us. So for the first time, an American president told Israel, watch what you're doing. How much he can do after that, we have seen his reaction with the Gaza flotilla. He just supported Israel. So I think it's an ongoing relationship. It's too tangled up, and it will need some time to be sorted out.
Would any president, no matter how popular he is or how strong he is, be able to do anything about this relationship?
Well, it's not. The relationship is not just between one president and the state of Israel. The problem we have with Zionism in this country is that it's deeply entrenched in our political establishment.
Well, how did that happen? When we're talking about an open political system and different views and you know, democracy, and that's...
We discuss every single view in the United States except the Zionist view. We criticize every ideology in the United States except Zionism. We denounce every act of discrimination around the world except Israeli discrimination. We oppose housing discrimination, but we fund Israeli settlements for Jews only. We oppose racism in the United States, but we fund Israeli highways for Jews only, built on stolen Palestinian land. So it's not just the President of the United States that...
And financed by here.
And financed. But it's also the American public opinion needs to address this entanglement we have with the State of Israel. We have to look at it honestly and openly. How did we get to this point? What are the options? How can we get out of it? How can we have a normal relationship with Israel, like any country?
How about the Arab role on all of this? I mean, we're not going to wait until the Americans do it. I mean, what is the Arab reaction? How the implication of this in the Arab leader, Arab regimes, and Arab people?
Well, if you look at it, Ahmed, I mean, the attack on this humanitarian aid convoy is not surprising for people in the Middle East or in the Islamic world. This is Israel doing what it always does. Israel's best enemies, they're always either 13-year-old kids or they're 87-year-old ladies, or it's humanitarian aid convoys, or it's ambulances. Their targets are always hospitals, schools. It's the type of things and of criminal, homicidal assaults on defenseless population that we have been seeing Israel do for 60 years now. There is nothing new.